Okay, hopefully everybody's recaptured. Just stay awake for this one. So, what's really interesting is hearing all the ducks. It's interesting to see how everybody is dealing with different situations in different places. And the thing that we find also very interesting is the U.S. is known to be one of the most litigious countries in the world. Yet we only had one shark control program. That was in the state of Hawaii, and that only existed twice in the 50s and during the 70s. So despite the fact that you saw that big giant bubble on the United States according to Gamma's data, it's that remarkable. And in the U.S., we'd never really had shark control and mitigation programs. So California, and Californians are a little weird if you didn't know that, is a very ecologically friendly state. So the project that I'm going to be talking about was one that was kind of surprising to me, because working in California for over 30 years and being there as a grad student, hearing about white sharks off beaches was incredibly rare. So over the last 10 years, things have really changed. What we've seen is bay, creeks, and white shark up our niches, and we were interested in why. So it turns out that conservation worked. So in 1994, the state of California adapted perfection for white sharks. They were caught in the commercial and recreational fisheries that were being landed. People were eating them. They didn't know they were white sharks they were eating, but they were eating those. And we saw a decline in the population. So for many shark populations throughout West waters, they had been fished and overfished for about 50 years. Numbers of it coming back over the last 20. And we assume a lot of this has to do with the crew fisheries manager. Also, in the case of white sharks, we've seen their primary food, which are pinnipeds, which are their favorite food, come back. They were overfished for 100 years. So now that those populations are coming back, they have some explanations to why they're more white sharks. When we look at bites in the U.S., and Dr. Naylor shared some of these data, in of course, the state of Florida, of course, meat filleting worldwide, we about 50% or so. So when we look at these records, they account for bulk of their small sharks, usually hands and feet, non-life-threatening. But when we get to fatalities, where we really begin to see those in places like California and Hawaii. And the reason for that is the same discussion that we've been having. There are larger sharks present in waters, tiger sharks, white sharks, and a small bite from a big shark that do a lot of damage, and that's can result from fatalities. So we do see increases in fatalities. So at these waters, we see higher fatality, but nonetheless, in California, we have one of the lowest white shark fatality rates anywhere in the world. We're somewhere around 10%. You heard in many other places it's higher, and I'll explain why we have a lower fatality rate. But with a few, we have bites across the entire state. It's a very large state. It covers about 2,000 kilometers of coastline, so it's fairly large. On average, we have 3 bites per year. Predominantly white sharks responsible for those bites. We do have other species that come into California waters during El Nino extreme weather events, like tiger sharks and bull sharks, but they're rare. So it's predominantly white sharks. And most of the bites are a mix of large juveniles and adults. Sharks usually greater than 3 years. So one of the things that we noted was conservation is working. I was saying yay, but not everybody was cheering. And the reason for that was lifeguards had seen a 5-fold increase in white sharks sighted off of the beaches over the last 10 years. And in addition, in Southern California, we had one of the most heavily populated coastlines in the world. There are 20 million people that live along those coastlines. And ocean recreation accounts for $1 billion of our annual revenue in Southern California alone. So ocean recreation is a very popular sport. And it's one of the few places in U.S. waters where you can enjoy that ocean recreation year-round. So in places like Santa Monica Bay, kind of looks like places that you saw in South Africa and Australia, where you'll have 10,000 people in the water at the same time in a fairly sizable bay. The other thing is when white sharks first started to come back, if you said the word white shark, lifeguards immediately pull people out of the water, even though those could have been juros, very small sharks, a year and a half, just because white shark was said. So as a result, a lot of beach closures were occurring at those spines. And in the last 5 years, beach closures have decreased, despite the fact that there's really nothing done. Now, what's really interesting is we know there are more sharks along these beaches and there are more people. What we're not seeing is an increase in bites. So we're not really sure how to explain that, other than white sharks seem to be occasionally bite people that they largely ignored. Nonetheless, when lights occur, it gets a huge amount of press, especially if it's leading into beach season in North America. So that actually we know, or we're measuring now, can have significant economic impacts to communities. We've been working with all the ocean lifeguards. Our ocean lifeguards are covering most of the beaches in Southern California, and they're year-round lifeguards. They have a big challenge in that ocean water safety is their biggest priority, and drownings are number one reason for fatalities in Southern California. So shark bites, even though they're worried, they get a lot of press, are actually very low risk. But nonetheless, when these increased numbers, lifeguards wanted to know more about what the sharks are doing there. So in 2018, one of our local assembly members wrote a co-authored bill with us, and we got funding to form the California Shark Safety Program. And it wasn't because there were increased bites, there was increasing concern about the increased population. So that project was really focused on asking questions like where are the sharks coming from, why are they choosing certain beaches, how long are they going to be there, what are they doing when they're there. What the lifeguards really wanted to know is when are they going to leave. And then of course we also got involved in a lot of social issues. So how do people perceive that having white sharks at the beach? Does it affect tourism? And what are the economic impacts of beach closures as a result of shark sightings or shark incidents? So that was the primary reason this funding. So we designed research programs to answer those questions. And then the goal was to get that science out to the community as quickly as possible. So we also have an education program that targets different groups. So because the ocean lifeguards are our clients in this case and our research partners, it's really important that we work together with them as we collect this information, and they're using that for adaptive management at beaches. In addition, we're also working with fishers, both commercial and recreational, that are interacting with sharks. And then, of course, we had a K-12 program, and that's our way of educating our race population. We also have an outreach program that goes out to public beaches, particularly during the summer, and does a lot of formal education on site. So the things that we know in California, based on a lot of our data, is that juvenile white sharks, this is the nursery ground for white sharks in Southern California, and this is the Southern California bite. So Los Angeles is right there. This is where we predominantly see juveniles close to the beach, very, very close, as you'll see. Adults typically are not near the shoreline. They're around our offshore islands or around our Central California coast. And they're only there during the winter months. And then the rest of the time, they're in the middle of the Pacific, halfway to Hawaii. We'll spend 8 months to a year and a half before returning to the California coastline to either give birth or to feed on seals. So one of the things that we notice is that we get these aggregations of juvenile white sharks along our beaches, and aggregations range up to 40 individuals. And then we use a beach of about 5 square kilometers, so a little less than 2 miles long. In this photograph right here, there are 9 juvenile white sharks in the area the size of a football field. They're anywhere between 1.5 meters and about 2.5 years long. And there's the weight break right there. So this is a very common phenomenon where these aggregations form. What we've been trying to figure out is what makes a good aggregation site a good aggregation site, and how level but say that way. So to answer these questions, we use a variety of technologies like me and my colleagues use. We use things like satellite transmitters that give us data on temperature depth or whether at the surface. We use a lot of acoustic transmitters, some of which we capture the sharks at search point and plant. They have a 10-year battery life, most of which we just dart to the shark's back. We do not fish up public beaches, so most of this is tagging from a boat or from a jet ski. In addition, we also use smart tags. These are accelerometer camera tags, and they give us a high-resolution idea of what the sharks are doing on a day-to-day basis. And then we have acoustic receivers, about 120 of them, covering from about 250 kilometers coast that we maintain and provide data collectors monthly. So all this technology gives us a variety of different abilities to look at shark movement and behavior at different resolutions, whether it's high resolution of Alligator Beach or migratory patterns. And then, of course, this technology is also used to make adaptive decisions. So the lifeguards are our only client. They're the only ones to get some of these data. So as I mentioned, we have 120 receivers all on the shoreline. It takes us a month to download all those data, provide those to lifeguards that get that data by region or by county. And they ask if they could get data faster. So by working with the manufacturer, we've developed buoys that are very similar to the ones they use in Australia. They're anchored about 200 meters off the beach, like our underwater receivers. Now, lifeguards get text alert, and they get real-time data. So here's what that website looks like. So here they get all the buoys in their region. Green means a recent detection. White means no detections. Red means offline. Think of this as each one of these is like a baseball card for a shark. It has all the stats for that shark. And then the lifeguards can click on that, and then it gives them all the information. Sex, the size of that shark, and then there's an animation so they can see all the locations where that shark was detected. Lifeguards are the only ones to get these data, and we've trained them to use this science tools, and they've already reduced beach closures because, for example, they know that there's been an East Coast white shark out off their beach every single day for a month, and nobody's seen it. So as the result, they post signs warning the public that this is shark habitat, that they no longer close beaches. Based on this alone, we believe we have already saved coastal communities several millions of dollars in what will be lost revenue due to unnecessary beach closures. So this is our acoustic receiver array. Again, it spans a huge part of California coastline. It takes my crew about a month to download all those receivers. It's very time consuming. But the lifeguards are now using these data to make better decisions on beach management. One of the things that we've learned from the stagging that's been going on about 10 years is that these aggregations form and break down, and then there's reformed at other locations. So you can see up in this part of, this is Los Angeles right here, and this area right here, we got aggregations where they were detecting sharks only here, nowhere else. And then that area went cold, and then this area went hot, and then that area went cold. So these areas keep moving, and our goal is to use the data and the environmental data that we're getting to predict what makes a hotspot, and when will it go cold. So one of the things we know is that water temperature is a key factor that influences the behavior of the sharks. So this is a location, by the way, our George Lucas's house is there, and Kev Koster's house is there, and Ellen Lick's there. This is a very expensive part of the Southern California coastline. We have a large aggregation of sharks. We had 40 juvenile white sharks using this beach for periods of 5 years. Each one of these dots you see is an acoustic receiver, and if the shark is detected by 3 or more receivers, we could get a geopositioner for that shark, and that's top time. So what we also did was monitor water temperature in this area. This is about 700 meters from shore from there to the edge of the ring. So less than a kilometer. Oh, animations aren't working. That's okay. So one of the things we found is we're able to get 3 peak temperatures in this how the depth is only 10 meters deep at its deepest part. And at this location in the summit, there's strong thermocline that forms, where the surface water is very warm, and then the seafloor water is cooler. So one of the things we found is that the sharks are spending most of their time in surface waters, and then in dawn and dusk will go down to the bottoms where they're feeding predominantly what we think are domestic fishes. So that's the majority of the time to spend surface. However, we have the cold storm events which bring upland water into the area, and the water temperatures drop. And when that happens, a lot of the sharks leave, and the sharks are now using the entire water column. So based on this, we have now figured out that sharks are making decisions on where they want to be based on a 30-meter diameter ring up around them as they're exploring that environment. But they're using these areas for up to 3 or 4 months at a time, day in, day out. So here's an animation of 1 week's worth of data that we get from that. Here you see seafloor water temperature, and there's a reef right here, and there's a reef here. And you can see that these juvenile white sharks, ranging anywhere from 1.5 meters to 3 meters long, are moving back and forth along this beach. By the way, this is the only public access. So this is a heavily used public access part of the beach. So quite often, sharks are moving within close proximity to people at the beach. You can see they move back and forth between reefs. This is only about 5.5 square kilometers. Yeah. So one of the questions we wanted to ask was how often people in proximity to sharks. So we also use drones. And this project was done by one of my graduate students who flew drone surveys at 26 Southern California beaches once a month for 2 years, and basically logged for 1,600 flights, 164 surveys, 700 hours of footage. And we had a lot of partners who also gathered data for us. And the goal of this project was to count all the different water users, measure their distance from the wave break, their distance from the shoreline, and their proximity to any sharks that they may encounter during the survey. So here's what a typical survey looks like on a drone. These are the drone data that you get. It was taking the student years to analyze these data, so we teamed up with engineers to develop machine learning algorithms. Now we can identify surfers, swimmers, body waders, waders, and sharks up to about 80-85%. really consistently. However, our water quality is not very clear, so therefore sharks have to be within probably a meter or two of a surface to be sighted from the drums. But remember, it's only about 2.5, 3 meters deep right here. So this enabled us to, more importantly, count how many people are in the water. And that has been a very important part. One of the things the Stoop found was 97% of the days that he did surveys at aggregation sites, there was a shark within 20 meters of a person. And then the other sites, non-aggregation sites, he would occasionally see sharks, but were only rarely. So it seemed as though at these aggregation sites, this is one of the aggregation sites. So again, there's Kevin Costner's house, and there's George Lucas's house. What you're seeing, all the triangles are where he saw sharks. The red area indicates where he saw sharks. The blue are where he saw people in the water. So you see a very high overlap between sharks and people at these sites. What's really interesting is there's only 2 beach access sites here and here. So people's to restrict it. When we compare it to another aggregation site further south, we see that these are all the locations where sharks were sighted. The blue indicates where people were. That this is a reef where we get a really good reef break, so surfers love to surf there, and that is the area where sharks end most of their climb. So we saw high overlap with sharks and humans at this location. Now what the lifeguards are doing is using this information because they know there are 10 beach access points. If they want to restrict activity in a place where sharks are acting aggressively or people, all they do is close beach access points here. So one of the interesting things that the study found is that beachgoers are not willing to walk more than 200 meters to go to the beach. So by limiting access sites, you can restrict some interaction. So the next question is, if sharks are spending weeks or months at these sites, what are they eating? They have to be eating while they're there. So what you're seeing here in this video, if it'll play, are all those dots you see there are stingrays. So there are thousands of stingrays. The young sharks eat those. We call them pancakes. There are lots of pancakes for them on the bottom. So I had students that were looking at the diet of those sharks in those areas. The way we did that was we would take muscle biopsies and we would use stable isotopes, and then we would sample prey in those areas and measure their stable isotopes, our chemical signatures. And the same UR which beat, we matched up those signatures with the composition in the muscle. So that was one of the Stooge projects, and we were able to compare that, what we were catching in terms of prey from these nets. And we also used brubs, so we deployed brubs to look at prey, not so much a shark, but who is in the area. And then I had a third graduate student who was taking water samples and then measuring prey and white shark DNA from the samples. So we sampled 4 sites, 2 aggregation sites, 2 non-aggregation sites, and they were able to compare prey abundance at those sites, shark abundance at those sites, and using eDNA compare and see how those sites changed in terms of prey abundance over time. So using beach stains gave us a measure of not just the prey numbers, but the sizes of the prey of the area, how likely are those part of the shark's diet. And then the brub cameras also gave us some additional data to begin to tease out what's available to sharks at these locations. And of course the eDNA, we took 8 samples, water samples, surface samples at the same locations. At the same time, we did beach stains and brubs. So we had simultaneous comparisons at aggregation sites and non-aggregation sites. One of the things we found was at non-aggregation sites, and we know that the sharks are predominantly eating small sharks or rays. At non-aggregation sites, we had higher abundances of rays and small sharks, as well as other benthic species. But at aggregation sites, where we had higher evidence of shark activity, we saw much fewer rays and sharks. And in addition, we saw an increased immigration away from those sites of sharks. So sharks that would use that aggregation for weeks or months would leave that site and go to another site. So we believe this is one of the things that makes a hotspot go cold, is they begin to feed down all preferred prey, which are less mobile than sharks themselves. So our goal is to give this science out to the public as quickly as possible. One of our tools that we use are something called shark shacks. We primarily train students. We get about 30 seats of beaches every summer, multiple times, ocean beers. We do a bunch of events. We engage 17 to 22,000 people a year at beach locations. So we spent a huge amount of time, and about a third of our budget goes into outreach and education. Even though we call them shark shacks, we also talk about stingray injuries. 10,000 people are treated for stingray injuries in Southern California alone. We talk about rip currents. So the goal is to educate but not scare.
We've built infographics based on along the science that we get out to the lifeguards and to the public. We've developed a number of short videos, YouTube videos, PSAs. And again, these are used to reach out to the public and educate not just locals, but also visitors. We worked on messaging because remember I told you lifeguards no longer pull people out of the water if there's sharks sighted at their beaches. So now they're using permanent signage. These are the signs they use in Cape Cod. They have monitored these signs and they found that people drive into the parking lot, they see that sign, they get back in their car and they drive away. And the reason is they find that sign frightening. So in Southern California, they'd asked us to come up with better signs. So what I did was I created art studios to work with my students. They developed new signage. And one of the things our psychology studies have found is that people are more receptive to artwork and they're more likely to look at a sign that has appealing parts. So in this sign, this is one that we put in the Central California coast to educate people about the adult-fed shark feeding applications in the fall. And you'll notice that this is basically the shark sending Coast Guard about what they're doing in different times of year. And we actually track people's attention that they spend to the signs. So they spend more time reading our signs, and when we interview them, they get more full size each time they look at it, which means we're being more effective in our messaging, and it's less likely to scare people away. We have a K-12 education program. This is a very large program. This year it's funded by LOWE, which is our National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. We have various grade levels, and we use sharks and robots to get kids interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. And then, like giving them their sweets, we also throw some vegetables in there, so we also use this to educate them about being safe. So we passed 7,000 students, students last year. We have a comic book series that we've given out 50,000 paper copies. This one is for junior guards, so ages about 9 to 16. This one's on big safety. It was so popular that we did one on brake pollution and one on how to be a shark scientist. They're available for free. We've given out 50,000 paper copies, and there are over 300,000 leads of our online free version. I also teamed up with a psychologist to help us understand people's perceptions on how we can better our messaging. So this person has helped us design studies to look at how people perceive sharks. And one of the things we found from several of our publications is that if people have a better understanding of sharks, in other words, how effective is our research changing their perceptions, that the more they think that sharks are cognitive animals, decision-making animals, the less likely they are to fear. So we found that to be very effective in helping us modify our messaging to create less fear and more sympathy towards these allies. In addition, we're also concerned about tourism. So we do intercept surveys and ecotourism expert that's helped you with us. She interviews people coming from all over, and one of the questions at the end of the survey is, do you know that there are white sharks at this beach? And if you do, you allow your children in the water. And one of the surprising things we found at a beach with a navigation site, which had been on national news, was the number of people that actually came to the beach hoping to see a white shark that day. So when we presented these data to the city councils, they were actually very excited about that. They were fearing the opposite in that. So this is out of a state-funded program. It's been funded by the state of California, but we would with every coastal community, town, city, municipality, and Jared Paul, our research partners, they contribute about $300,000 a year e-cut support. And in addition, this program costs us about $1.3 billion a year to run, covering over 600 months of coastline. We're also doing a study on economics. This is a project being done by our environmental economists. The question is, what are the environmental impacts of shark bites on the community? We had an example where a woman was with me in April, 60 miles south of Pine Beach, which is a world-renowned break. Everybody knows that. In the month of April, I was at a meeting in Huntington Beach where the city council had the Chamber of Commerce come, and because that a national news, 60 miles north of a community lost $7 million in hotel reservations as a result of that ruse. So again, it may show how poor Americans are with the geography. So this bite happened 60 miles north of where that actually happened. But it shows the breadth at which these things can have impacts. So the questions that we're trying to look at now are, what can we do to reduce some of that media coverage? So we have a media training program. So I work with reporters and I teach them about how to cover stories like this. And then I give them stories about our research. In addition to, well, you want to cover the bite, everybody else does too. How about learning some of the new techniques we're using? And we found that we shorten the amount of news about the bites and increase the amount of news that we get about our program and what we're doing to solve some of these problems. So by working directly with reporters, we've had a better job of reducing some of that. And in addition, one of the things that we're trying to do is look at both short and long-term beach closures. So for example, if there is an incident, a beach is closed for 2 weeks. That is the California policy for dealing with a shark bite, including a fatality, 2 weeks. So we are now using some of our science like eDNA wire testing to determine whether they're shark bite question. We don't know how well that technique is going to work, but combined with tagging drones, we've been effective at that thing. Look at that, following some respects. So the goal is to be able to come up with new modern techniques, and our last one are autonomous vehicles. So we're using developing surface autonomous vehicles that leave water sample for eDNA and simultaneously listen for tag sharps in those areas. Now we're playing this with sonar technology. These can patrol beach for a week autonomously, fully solar. So they can operate fully solar just outside the reef frame. So our hope is in the next year to have that technology ready to roll. Here are all our partners. Many cities, all of those PBTs are partners with us. So then.